Mm. Hello and welcome back. Today is Saturday, December 14th, 2024, and we are reading chapter 38 of Lirael by Garth Nix today. And hopefully you can't hear my washing machine in the background. And I apologize for my half pink eye. I got something in my eye this morning and I could not find it. I think I got it out, but my eye is still really itchy. But anyways, I'm going to get right into this chapter. Lirael and the disreputable dog have finally met Sam and Margaret on the Readalong. So let's see what happens. Chapter 38, The Book of the Dead. The explanations had to wait almost the whole day, because Sam didn't wake up until Finder gently beached herself on a sandy spit, and Lirael began to set up camp on the adjoining island. Over a dinner of grilled fish, dried tomatoes, and biscuit, they told each other their stories. Lirael was surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. It was almost like talking to the dog. Perhaps it was because he wasn't a Clare, she thought. "So you've seen Nicholas," said Sam heavily, "and he's definitely with this necromancer Hedge, digging up some terrible free magic thing. I guess that must be the lightning trap he wrote to me about. I was hoping, stupidly I suppose, that it was all a coincidence, that Nick wouldn't have anything to do with the enemy. He was really going to the Red Lake because he'd heard about something interesting." "I didn't see it myself," Lirael said reluctantly, to forestall any requests that she used her supposed sight to find out more. "I mean, they showed it to me. It took a watch of more than 1,500 Clare to see near the pit, but they didn't know when it was, or will be. It might not have happened yet." "I guess he hasn't been in the kingdom for that long," said Sam doubtingly, "but I would think he would have made it to the Red Lake by now. And the digging you saw might have started without him. The dead in the blue caps and scarves must be Sutherland refugees, the ones who came across the wall more than a month ago." "Well, according to the Clare's other vision, I will find Nicholas at the Red Lake sometime soon," said Lirael, "but I don't want to go there unprepared, not if Hedge is with him." "This is getting worse by the day," said Sam, groaning and cradling his head in his hands. "We'll have to send a message to Elamir, and, I don't know, get my parents back from Ancelstier. Only then there are the Sutherlings to worry about. Maybe Mother could come back and Dad could stay there." "I think the Clare have already sent messages," said Lirael, "but they don't know as much as we do, so we should send some too. Only we'll have to do something ourselves, won't we? It'll take too long for the king and the Abhorsen to even hear about this, let alone come back." "I suppose so," said Sam, without enthusiasm. "I just wish Nick had waited for me at the wall." "He probably didn't have a choice," said the dog, who was curled up at Lirael's feet, listening. Mogget lay nearby, his paws extended towards the dying remnants of the cooking fire, clean fish bones near his face. As soon as he'd eaten dinner, he'd fallen asleep, ignoring Sam and Lirael's conversation. "I suppose so," agreed Sam, as he absently looked at the scars on his wrist. "That necromancer, Hedge, must have got hold of him when we were at the perimeter. I never actually saw Nick after that. We just exchanged letters. I guess I'll just have to keep trying to find the dumb bastard." "He looked sick," said Lirael, surprised by the feeling of concern that rose in her from the memory. "He'd reached out his hand to her and said hello." "Sick and confused. I think the free magic was affecting him, but he didn't realize what it was. Nick never really understood what it was like here, or accepted the idea that magic works," said Sam, staring into the embers. "Nick had only got worse as he got older, always asking why. He'd never accepted anything that seemed to contradict his understanding of the forces of nature and the mechanics of how the world worked." "I don't understand Ancelstier," said Lirael. "I mean, I've heard about it, but it might as well be another world." "It is," said the dog, "or it's best to think of it that way." "It always seemed somehow less real than here," said Sam, still staring at the fire, not really listening. He was watching the sparks fly up now, trying to count the number of them in each little flurry. "A really detailed dream, but sort of washed out, like a thin watercolor, softer somehow, even with their electric light and engines and everything. I guess it was because there was hardly any magic at school, because we were too far from the wall. I could weave shadows and do tricks with light sometimes, but only when the wind blew from the north. Sometimes I felt like part of me was asleep, not being able to reach the charter. He fell silent, still staring at the embers. After a few minutes, Lirael spoke again. "Getting back to what we're going to do," she said hesitantly. "I was going to Choir, to get the constables or the royal guard there to escort me to Edge, but it seems that Hedge already knows about me, about us, so that can't be a very sensible thing to do. I mean, I still have to get to the Red Lake, but not so openly. It would be stupid to just tie up at the Choir jetty and get out, wouldn't it?" "Yes," agreed the dog, looking up at her, proud that she had worked this out for herself. There was a smell about Hedge, a smell of power strong enough for me to catch when Lirael escaped him. I think he's more than a necromancer, but whatever he is clever, and has long prepared to move against the kingdom. He will have servants among the living, as well as the dead." Samuel didn't answer for a moment. He tore his gaze away from the fire, frowning as he saw Mogget's sleeping form. Now that Nicholas was definitely known to be in the clutches of the enemy, Sam didn't know what to do. Rescuing Nicholas had seemed like a good idea, back in the safety of his tower room. Simpler, uncomplicated. "We can't go to Choir," he said. "I was thinking we should go to the house, Abhorson's house, I mean. I can send message hawks from there, and we can, get stuff for the journey, mail hauberks, a better sword for me." "And it would be safe," said the dog, with a penetrating look at Sam. Sam looked away, unable to meet the dog's eyes. Somehow she knew his secret thoughts. Half of him said he would have to go on, half of him said that he couldn't. He felt sick with the tension of it. Wherever he went, he could not escape being the Abhorsen in waiting, and all too soon he would be shown to be an impostor. "I think that's a good idea," said Lirael. "It's on the long cliffs, isn't it? We can strike west from there, staying off the roads. Are there any horses at the house?" "I can't ride, but I could wear a charter skin while you—" "My horse is dead," interrupted Sam, suddenly white-faced. "I don't want another one." He got up abruptly and limped out into the darkness, staring at the Readalong, watching the silver ripples in its dark expanse. He could hear Lirael and that dog creature, which was too much like Mogget for comfort, talking behind him, too low to make out the words. But he knew they were talking about him, and he felt ashamed. "He's a spoiled brat," whispered Lirael crossly. She wasn't used to this sort of behavior. On her explorations, she had done what she wanted, and in the library there was strict discipline and a chain of command. Sam had provided useful information, but otherwise he seemed to be a nuisance. "I was just trying to make some sort of plan. Maybe we should leave him behind." "He is troubled," acknowledged the dog, "but he has also been through much that tested him beyond all expectation, and he's hurt and afraid. He will be better tomorrow and in the days to come." "I hope so," said Lirael. Now that she knew more about Nicholas, the lightning trap, and the attacks of the dead upon Sam, she realized she would probably need all the help she could get. The entire kingdom would need all the help it could get. "It is his job, after all," she added, "being the Abhorsen in waiting. I should be safely back at the glacier while he deals with Hedge and whatever else is out there." "If the Abhorsen and the king are correct about Hedge's plans, nowhere will be safe," said the dog, "and all who bear the blood must defend the charter." "Oh, dog," Lirael said plaintively, giving the hound a hug. "Why is everything so difficult?" "It just is," said the dog, wolfing in her ear. "But sleep will make it seem easier. A new day will bring new sights and smells." "How will that help?" grumbled Lirael. But she lay down on the ground, dragging her pack over to use as a pillow. It was too hot for a blanket, even with the slight breeze off the river. Hot and awfully humid, with mosquitoes and sandflies into the bargain. Summer had not yet begun as far as the kingdom's calendar was concerned, but the weather had paid no attention to human reckoning, and there was no sign of a cooling rainstorm. Lirael swatted a mosquito, then turned her head as Sam came back and rummaged in his saddlebag. He was getting something out, a bright, sparkling object. Lirael sat up as she saw it was a jeweled frog, a frog with wings. "I'm sorry I behaved badly before," Sam mumbled, setting down the flying frog. "This will help with the mosquitoes." Lirael didn't need to ask how. It became clear immediately as the frog executed a backward somersault and used its tongue to collect 2 particularly large and blood-laden mosquitoes. "Ingenious," said the dog, sleepily, lifting her head for a moment from the comfortable hole she'd scratched out to sleep in. "I made it for my mother," said Sam, self-pity evident in his voice. "That's about the only thing I'm really good at, making things." Lirael nodded, watching the frog wreak havoc on the local insect population. It moved effortlessly, bronze wings beating as fast as a hummingbird's, making a soft sound like tightly closed shutters moving slightly in the wind. "Margaret had to kill her," Sam said suddenly, looking back into the fire. "My horse, Sprout. I pushed her too hard. She foundered. I couldn't do the mercy stroke. Margaret had to cut her throat to make sure the dead didn't kill her and grow stronger." "It doesn't sound like there was much choice," said Lirael, uncomfortably. "I mean, there was nothing else you could have done." Sam was silent, staring at the few red coals that remained, seeing the shapes and patterns of orange, black, and red. He could hear the rattlin's subdued roar all around, the wheezing breath of the sleeping dog. He could practically feel Lirael sitting there, 3 or 4 steps away, waiting for him to say something. "I should have done it," he whispered. "But I was afraid of death. I always have been." Lirael didn't say anything, feeling even more uncomfortable now. No one had ever shared something so personal with her before, least of all something like this. He was the Abhorsen's son, the Abhorsen in waiting. It simply wasn't possible that he could be afraid of death. That would be like a Claire who was afraid of the sight. That was beyond imagining. "You're tired and wounded," she said finally. "You should rest. You'll feel better in the morning." Sam turned to look at her, but kept his head down, not meeting her gaze. "You went into death," muttered Sam. "Were you afraid?" "Yes," acknowledged Lirael. "But I followed what it said in the book." "The book?" asked Sam, shivering despite the heat. "The Book of the Dead?" "No," replied Lirael. She'd never even heard of the Book of the Dead. "The Book of Remembrance and Forgetting. It deals with death only because that's where a remembrancer has to go to look into the past." "Never heard of it," muttered Sam. He looked at his saddlebags as if they were bulging poison sacs. "I'm supposed to be studying the Book of the Dead, but I can't stand looking at it. I tried to leave it behind, but it followed me, with the bells. I can't get away from it, but I can't look at it either. Now I'll probably need them both to save Nick. It's so bloody unfair. I never asked to be the Abhorsen in waiting." "I never asked for my mother to walk away from me when I was 5, or to be a Claire without the sight," thought Lirael. He was young for his age, this Prince Samuth, and, as the dog said, he was tired and wounded. Let him have his bout of self-pity. If he didn't snap out of it tomorrow, the dog could bite him. That's always worked on her. So instead of saying what she thought, Lirael reached out to touch the bandolier lying at Sam's side. "Do you mind if I look at the bells?" she asked. She could feel their power, even as they lay there quiescent. "How do you use them?" "The Book of the Dead explains their use," he said reluctantly, "but you can't really practice with them. They can only be used in earnest." "No! Don't! Please don't take them out." "I'll be careful," said Lirael, surprised at his reaction. He'd gone pale, quite white in the darkness, and was shivering. "I do know a bit about them already, because they're like my pipes." Sam shuffled back a few steps, the panic rising in him. If she dropped a bell or accidentally rang one, they might both be hurled into death. He was afraid of that, desperately afraid. At the same time, he felt a sudden urge to let her take the bells, as if that might somehow break their connection with him. I suppose you can look at them, he said hesitantly, if you really want to. Lirael nodded thoughtfully, running her fingers over the smooth mahogany handles and the rich beeswax-treated leather. She had a sudden urge to put on the bandolier and walk into death to try the bells. Her little panpipes were a toy in comparison. Sam watched her touch the bells and shivered, remembering how cold and heavy they had felt upon his chest. Lirael's scarf had fallen back, letting her long black hair tumble out. There was something about her face in the firelight, something about the way her eyes reflected the light, that made Sam feel awed. He had the sense that he'd seen her before, but that was impossible, as he'd never been to the glacier, and she'd never left it until now. Could I also have a look at the Book of the Dead? Asked Lirael, unable to disguise the eagerness in her voice. Sam stared at her, his mind paralyzed for a moment. The Book of the Dead could destroy you, he said, his voice betraying him with a stutter. It's not to be trifled with. I know, said Lirael. I can't explain, but I feel that I must read it. Sam considered. The Clare were cousins of the royal line and the Abhorsen, so he supposed Lirael had the blood right. Enough not to get destroyed straight away. She'd also studied the Book of Remembrance and Forgetting, whatever that was, which seemed to have made her something of a necromancer, at least as far as traveling in death was concerned, and her charter mark was true and clear. It's there, he said roughly, pointing at the appropriate saddlebag. He hesitated, then backed away, till he was a good 10 paces from the fire, closer to the river, with both the dog and Mogget between him and Lirael, and the book. He lay down, purposefully looking away from Lirael. He didn't want to even see the book. His flying frog jumped after him and rapidly cleared the mosquitoes away from his makeshift bed. Sam heard the straps of the saddlebags being opened behind his back. Then came the soft brilliance of a charter light, the snap of silver clasps, and the ruffling of pages. There was no explosion, no sudden fire of destruction. Sam let out his breath, closed his eyes, and willed himself to sleep. He would be at Abhorsen's house within a few days. Safe. He could stay there. Lirael could go on alone. Except, his conscience said as he drifted off, Nicholas is your friend. It's your job to deal with necromancers, and it's your parents who would expect you to face the enemy. And that is the end of chapter 38. So, I hope you enjoyed that reading. I will post chapter 39 tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's it. I'm going to go to a Christmas party tonight and then try to stay warm and get some Christmas ornaments out. I've got all kinds of stuff out, but I haven't put any on the tree yet, so I need to do that. But I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you enjoy your weekend. Take care, and as always, may your magic manifest. Bye.